So, ladies, why don't you here? Lustica is originally from Brooklyn and started out working in a law firm while she studied paralegal at night, and then after that worked for CBS as an assistant to the president of CBS. So I'm sure there's a lot of stories there. In 1990, she came down to our area, to Red Bank, and was working, actually trying to get hired as a legal secretary, but was informed that she had too much experience. So ended up working in retail, Estee Lauder, at the Lord & Taylor store, and then back to working for lawyers as a paralegal after that. And then in 2009, went into business as a realtor. Pamela Major is from our area, grew up in Bergen County, and now lives in Asbury Park. She's a sought-after speaker and coach, has her own company called Melia Bloom, whose goal is to help clients become comfortable with their lives. You work as a coach, and also volunteers at the Interfaith Neighbors in Asbury Park as a financial literacy program, which is a way of helping people manage their own finances to get their lives where they want to be. So she can tell you more about that. She has also created a program called Her Harvest Women's Outreach and a Viva Viral Vision Adventure, which you can tell us more about the program. She has published a book called I Am a Diamond, a playbook and journal for life, and is working on another book that is due out next year. She also volunteers here at the Lunch Break Women's Program. It's called Women's Work. And Georgette Thomas also is local, grew up in Middletown, and has been a lifelong resident of Middletown Township. Went to the Middletown High School, worked for 31 years in the banking industry, first with Wells Fargo and then with UBS Payne Weber. Doesn't really remember ever having to deal with any racial unrest. In fact, her graduating class of 1977 in Middletown had an African-American class president and vice president, both from your neighborhood in Middletown. She started as a operations file clerk when she first went into the finance industry, and then ended as the only African-American female vice president of operations in her company. She has then finished her banking career and started a second career as a caterer, and is now about to embark on whatever comes next. The last update I heard. She wears many hats through civic, church, educational, and multicultural organizations, and in April 2021, Georgette's family will be celebrating 100 years of ownership of their family's property in Hillside Park in Middletown Township. So I asked each of them to talk a little bit, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, about your experience in the workforce, good and bad stories and whatnot, and then we'd like to open for discussion and conversation with the audience. So, do you want to start? Do you want to duke it out? Okay.
I started working in '72 while still in high school in the co-op program that they have in New York. And so they threw me in a law firm. And so when I graduated in '73, I already had a year experience. All the lawyers were men. And after staying there for a few years, I decided to see what was over in Brooklyn and got hired by a firm, all men, except for one woman. And she sort of took me under her wing, and she was one of the first women in law school in the 1920s. And when I was working with her, she was probably in her 80s at that time.
Wow.
And so she was very much an inspiration to me because I knew that when she started out in law school, she was probably up against more resistance than I will ever see in my life. And so I stayed there for a few years, went to paralegal school at night, and took that newfound knowledge and went to work in Manhattan. And I started in the law department at CBS. And then when the Westmoreland case broke, my boss and I went over to the news division, which is where we needed to be because of the lawsuit. And almost all of the executives and higher personnel, producers and so forth, were all men. But every now and then you would run into a woman who was a force to be reckoned with, and that's probably why she held the position she did. After staying with CBS for 10 years, I came back. I ended up moving to New Jersey in 1990, where I started interviewing, and all the lawyers said, you know, you just too much experience, you're overqualified, you won't be happy here, you'll work here 3 weeks and you'll quit. And I said, I've moved to New Jersey, I've committed myself. So I think the Lord & Taylor was about to open up in the Monmouth Mall, and I ended up helping put the store together, and they made me counter manager of Estee Lauder, run by a woman, the store. And it was maybe 3 years before I went back to, there was no money in retail in those days. It was very hard to get the dollar from the woman, very, very tough. And so I went back to working with lawyers and worked for a few firms, almost all men. And one of the 5-year stints I did was at MITRE, and MITRE is a defense contractor subsidized by the government, and almost all of the engineers were men. But there were a handful of women who were very, very strong in their field and in their positions, and so very inspiring. But every place I worked, I always noticed that the majority of the workforce was 80% men, maybe 85. And that sort of changed slightly with the years. Now I'm seeing a reversal, because in 2005, 2009, I went to get my real estate license. And this was a business controlled by men. Almost every real estate agent was a man. And now the opposite is true. Almost every real estate agent is a woman. And if we have a meeting, there will be 20 women and 2 men. And so in the company, if we have 200 agents, I think we have 10 men. So the women are taking their rightful role in leadership and in positions of power, and not a moment too soon, and it's good to see. And I think we should encourage our younger generation of women growing up to be leaders, to aspire to be their own boss, entrepreneurs, or if they're going to work in the workforce, to educate themselves enough so that they can end up being in a managerial or part of ownership position. And I'm seeing that in my church. I'm seeing a lot of the students that are going off to school and coming back, owning their own businesses or working and achieving positions that are quite impressive. So it's nice to see that women, young women especially, have adopted the attitude that I can do this, I will do this, I am doing this. So it's good to see.
Hi everybody, I am going to jump into the middle of my career. And actually, just a slight correction, I was actually hired by Interfaith Neighbors to be a coach. And they had a long-term financial literacy program, and most of the clients were women. Most of the clients were single moms. So what I find in Monmouth County, which is kind of interesting, is that we have a high number of women who have actually gotten to managerial status. We really do have kind of a tale of two counties, if you will. So you have this group of people who have done well. They've been educated, they've put in the work, they've put in the time, and they have gotten to places that they imagined and that they did dream of, and they're doing quite well. And then you have the women that I worked with that were clients. Again, many of whom were single moms and had to make some excruciating decisions about how they were going to live. And being a woman with just one child almost automatically puts you beneath the poverty level. And it forces you to have to make a lot of decisions. And as a coach, some of the most challenging things for me were saying things like, you know, we probably don't need to get manicures for a while. We probably don't need to get the weave for a while. Do you know what it's like to sit across the table from a woman and tell her that she can't get her hair and nails done? Just imagine what that was like. But the reality was the hair and nails were costing over $200 a month. And while it gave a false sense, and I will say a false sense of security, it was still a security. And I had to work to establish a real sense of self-worth in these women. And I had very few male clients, very few married clients. Most of the people that were there were women with children. Do you know, or can you imagine what it's like to be with your babies and get an eviction notice? Can you imagine what it was like when they realized that they were going to be part of a program that was going to assist them in paying part of their rent over time? It gave us enough time to help them learn a system, even if they couldn't do it all. And we did have some great success stories, but even if they couldn't do it all, they learned this is the system. They learned to live at a level of humility that would allow them to prosper later on. What do I mean? For a little while, you might need to go to the food pantry. For a little while, you might need to go to a place like lunch break and go to Clara's Closet and go get some clothing for your interviews or for your day-to-day work. For a little while, you might need to do some of these things. For a little while, you might need to get a 3-bedroom apartment with another person, and you and your children can kind of work things out. For a little while, you might need to get a 1-bedroom, give your child a bedroom, and sleep on a sleeper couch. These were some of the things that we shared, and I expressed it's not forever, it's just for now. And a lot of the women began to understand that if I just do these little things, bit by bit, inch by inch, I will be able to have the life that I'm really thinking about. It gave them space to begin to dream again. And that was something that was very significant to me. And so, of course, the grant funding at some point went away. And so the program went away. Now it was put into other financial literacy programs, but it wasn't anything like what we were able to establish. And I can still remember the last day of the program. I had 3 clients, and they cried, and I cried. And I cried, and they cried. And when I got home that night, I said, I can't let this stop. And I think that's the determination that all of us need to have about our passion, right? I can't let this stop. So what did I do? I created Her Harvest Women's Outreach. And so in that program, while I'm not offering rental assistance, at least not yet, somebody will pick it up and decide that we'll be able to do that. But what I am doing is coaching. What I am doing is inspiring and giving strategies to women so that they are able to move on and do the kinds of things that they desire to do. And it's an inspiration to them because they're watching me do what I dreamed about doing. they are watching me speak to them and speak life to them. They're watching me, they've seen the book, they've seen my book, they know that it's really a book, it's really published, it's really out there. And so these things have given them the courage to say, I'm going to try, I'm going to move, I'm going to do something more with my life than right now. And this program is not just for women who are financially disadvantaged, it's for women who are stuck. It's for women who are in transition and they know that they need to move to the next level, but somewhere the car is just not moving. Somewhere they just can't figure it out. And so they made the brave and bold decision to say, I want to be a part of the program. How much does it cost them? Time. It's a free program. I do it once a year from January to April. So we're just about finished. They can't believe it, that we are just about finished. And we are doing a community service project because I give to you, and I think it's important to give back to others. So we will be doing a fashion show at the end of June, and we are celebrating women who are in recovery, in reentry, and who are thriving in getting past domestic violence. So it's been an amazing, amazing experience. I have great people that I work with. They inspire me, and thankfully I inspire them. And that's a little bit about me, and we'll talk more later.
Okay, good evening. So, my name is Georgette Thomas, and I grew up in Middletown, New Jersey, in the Hillside Park section, which is between Navesink and Leonardo. Patty explained that we really didn't have any racial unrest. It's an 8-block radius between Portland Road and 7th Avenue. It was almost entirely black when I grew up. So I did a little research, asked some of my elders, was there any racial unrest? We didn't have any. So I went through Middletown school systems, through Navesink for elementary, Bayshore for middle school, Middletown High School North for 10th and 11th. And Middletown High School South, the first year was our year, 1977. My first cousin, who I call my sister, was the president of the senior class, and another member of the community was the vice president. They have to vote you in to do that. They voted them in. So we went along. College was okay. My parents said, we don't like the way you did high school, so if you want to go to college, you're going to have to pay for it. So that was a shocker to me. I really thought that I was just going to ride, you know. So I didn't go to college. I went to Colonial First National Bank at 53 Broad Street in Red Bank. I stopped at McDonald's that was on Broad Street in Red Bank, and I filled out the application. And then I took it to 303 Broad Street in Red Bank and handed it in. When I got home, they called me to come back for an interview. When I got home from the interview, they called me back and told me I had a job. So I worked in operations. I started in an operations center at Little Silver, and we moved from Little Silver to Freehold, still in operations, in different capacities. We moved from there to North Brunswick. And then in 1981, I moved from there to Newark. And I continued to learn just different areas of banking through those experiences. And when I went to Newark, I started working in the controllers department. At the time I started working was 1977 through 2008. But with Colonial, it had many mergers. So I went through probably 4 major mergers and probably 10 conversions and acquisitions. So that was my forte. As I said, I didn't go to college. I did take some classes through the American Institute of Banking, which gave me an introduction into banking and an advanced certification in banking. But I didn't really go to college at all. I took some classes at Brookdale here and there, and that was pretty much it. So then I landed a job which was part of UBS, which is a brokerage firm. And the part of that firm that I worked for was called PW Trust Company. What we did was we managed the 401k pension and qualified plan money for other companies. So I kind of, you know, worked in the operations area, and I did bank reconciliation, and we had money coming in, and then I started to invest. So what kind of happened with that was that I became very, very good at my craft. My craft was operations, to the point of managing $6 billion a day with 42 money managers, 42 portfolios, and about 38 outside money managers for other people's money. And that's what I did. So I elevated from working in just operations to managing probably a group of 10 to elevating to a vice president of that. And I did that without a degree. And that as I came out of that, you know, that didn't happen anymore. People that were coming into banking, you needed a degree of some sort. And by the time I left, they really wanted you to have a master's in business or in finance or in something. But I had already elevated to the point that it couldn't take away the knowledge that I had. So was there some subtle racism or, you know, that type of thing going on? Of course. I worked for a company that men were in charge of finance. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. It didn't really matter about the color of her skin, but you were female. But what happened in finance is female ran back office. A lot of females ran back office, to the point of the mortgage-backed debacle of 2007 and 8. Women were running that. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So because I saw the writing on the wall, and I had been through so many mergers and conversions, and I knew that they were going to close our trust company, I raised my hand and I said, I'll take the layoff. I had been in the business for 30 years, almost 31 years. I could not make it any better for you in the back office. There was just too much stuff that they had done on Wall Street that was not good, and we couldn't fix that part. That was something that you were going to have to go through it, and the pendulum was going to maybe swing back, maybe not all the way, but we have seen it swing back and forth over 30 years. So I said, I need to take the layoff. And this is the only part in really working in corporate America that I had to use the race card. And they didn't want to let me go. They wanted me to take that company to the next company. But I knew eventually, after this many years of being in it, that company was going to dissolve as well. And then I would be out of a job. So I used the race card that said, and I did get an attorney. I got an attorney for some advice. I didn't get an attorney to sue anybody, but I needed a little leverage. And I said, listen, I can't make it any better for you, and it would behoove you to allow me to take this layoff package, because I am your only African-American female vice president of this company being paid the least amount of money. I was also a founder of the company. When that company started, I started it in Secaucus in 1987. So with that, they kind of thought about it. I packaged it up. I left on the last day. I cried with the other people that were founders of the company who cried. It was very difficult. I had been with the company for 21 years at that point. and it was from the very beginning. So I packed up my many crates because I had my own office, and after 21 years, you collect a lot of stuff. So I used that time. I got very depressed because I had been working for so long right out of high school, and I went to unemployment, and I said, I need to reinvent myself. And unemployment said, you need to find something in demand. I said, what can I find in demand? Well, my father showed me how to cook, so I had always been a caterer. Even during banking years, I was a caterer. So I went there and I said, I will take culinary. And they said, okay. And they put me through, this is where I earned my degree. They put me through culinary school at Brookdale Community College, and I got my applied science degree in culinary science. So that's how I did that. I'm not saying that it's easy for everybody to do without a degree. You may, but I just worked kind of hard at it, and I loved my job. I loved banking from the time I started. So that's my story.
So we'd like to open the floor to some questions, comments. Is there anything that you want to ask any of our panelists? What they particularly found good, difficult in their careers? Anything that you thought of that you might want to comment on, including the lovely little training video that we saw? How many thought that was possibly like a fake, made up to mock the 50s? No, it was
I don't think it was fake for the time.
No, for the time it was really,
Very real.
yeah.
And I was sitting here thinking, we saw white women going into jobs and going, I'd really like to see their reaction for the a person of color, and their reactions to the bearing inspector with credentials, things like that. So that's what came into my head when I was watching that. Oh, okay. But I do have a question of the panel. Right now, or for the last couple of years, there's been a lot of discussion about the Ledbetter Act and trying to get equal pay for equal women. And that just does not seem to connect with the powers. And I don't understand it. I mean, if I'm doing the job of somebody I'm sitting next to, and I've been in this situation, and I'm even doing it better and showing that person how to do it, I don't understand the reluctance of just giving us what's right to do. And if you can just provide some insight into what is the resistance of corporations and powers that be? Why are they so resistant to a very common sense, obvious?
Well, in real estate, it is based on the agent. And so if an agent works feverishly, there's no guarantee that they're going to have transactions that's closed. You close something, you get a commission check. And sometimes, like last year, there was 5 months where I didn't have any money coming in because my 6 deals were railroaded and delayed, and there were challenges, but then they all closed like in the same month. But what did I do in that 5 months? You talk about inspiring yourself to get out of bed in the morning, like in month 4, and knowing that God's going to turn this around, and having faith and just holding on to that. That was tough. That was tough. Even looking back on it now, it was tough. But as soon as the checks came in, you paid everybody back, and you're back off and running. Most of the companies in real estate will start you off at 50%. So whatever you bring in, you get 50% of it, and they take 50%. At Exit Realty, they start everybody off at 70%. So already that's 20% more. In a new agent, seasoned agent, any agent, they came after me, so I negotiated a little higher. If they wanted me, they were going to have to bounce it up, and they did. But it is based on the time that you put into real estate as an agent, and it's not a job for everybody. You can't have a 9-to-5 mentality. It is not a 9-to-5 job. You start in the morning and you fall asleep at night, thinking, drinking, eating real estate, if you want to be successful. I think that the fact that there are more women. Probably those women have husbands that take care of the financing, and so, but there are a lot of agents that live from check to check, and it's not every Friday that one comes in. So it gets very, very challenging and tough financially. So you have to be very smart with your money. Guidance, you know, just one of the things that you get with a big check, you go shopping, you make a little trip, you go buy this, you see that person. No, you have to put it aside, you have to put towards marketing. And you have to be very money savvy in order to stretch it to go to the next commission. With every year I'm in real estate, it's getting better and better, but there's no guarantee that because you have 5 deals that any of them are going to close, because something always gets derailed along the way. For whatever reasons, they could be all reasons beyond your control. Somebody lost a job, one of the buyers died, one of the couples, they decided to divorce, now they don't want the house. So it could be a number of reasons. So you have to make sure that there is some sort of side account where you can pull from because there's no guarantee. And again, you make your own money by the amount of work that you put into it, but again, it's no guarantee.
If I could jump in, okay, so this video that we just saw was 1959, which is just 60 years ago. So the child of that man is alive with those same types of thoughts right now, and they are in charge, right? And so there is still, for some, the thought process of, well, this is the breadwinner, so he needs to earn more money than this woman who has a husband that's taking care of her, so she doesn't need to have as much money because he's got the money, right? The reality is that there are many, ask me how I know, because they sat across the table with me and we cried and we budgeted and we planned and we learned about coupons and everything else so that they would be able to live. But when you have, and I've shared this with some young people, that the boomers are still in charge. They're fading, but the boomers are still in charge, and that's a boomer mentality. And as the millennials get in charge, and they're coming, the one thing, there are things that I'm not crazy about in terms of millennials because time doesn't seem to mean anything. And I'm 4th generation early. Like, I was here at, 6:05? And I was mad because I wasn't here at 6 o'clock.
Me too.
Okay, because we were supposed to start, I thought we were starting at 6:30. Right. So I was mad that I wasn't here at 5 minutes, and I'm mad at myself, okay? So that's kind of the generation that I come from. But what I do like about the millennials is they will not allow themselves to be abused. And they will, if it doesn't mean something, if it's not meaningful in terms of the job, and they can't see that the promises that you made from day one, it might be day 15, but I don't see those promises starting to gel at all. As a matter of fact, I see you backtracking. So guess what? I'm going to backtrack too. And so often, many of the jobs that millennials many of the jobs that they're going to have not been created. And I've heard that over and over again, and I believe it. It has not been created. I had one person who started our program when they came to work with me. And I said, I don't think you want to do that because that is not going to produce income. They're going to use a computer to do that job. And sure enough, 6 weeks later, when the program was ending, they were using computers to do that job. So I think there are a lot of things to think about. We are still in transition. I mean, you think about it, 2020, if memory serves, that's only 100 years since women have had the vote. And 100 years against the canvas of history is 0 time. That's like, you might be getting ready to go into labor pain. You just might. So there are still people in charge with that mindset. There are still people and practices and beliefs that are there that do not serve the population in general. I had the opportunity, one of my positions was being a school teacher. Now, being a school teacher, male, female, now it wasn't always that way, but male, female, if I'm on step 6 and step 6 is $50,000 a year, that's what it is, right? The work part of it, and that's really where I focus. The work part of it, the getting out there, the doing things, to making sure that you are excellent at your craft and tireless in your pursuit. That combination actually ends up pushing women above and beyond. Women are graduating from college at a higher rate now. Women are getting into positions and staying there at a higher rate now because of the transition. And it's good and it's bad, right? It's good and it's bad. We have some interesting family dynamics now because of some of the things that ERA promised, and although it didn't pass, there are some things, that liberty that we felt that we could take. Now we have the liberty to have just as much heart disease as men.
Stress.
Right? Now we have the liberty to worry about the whole household just as much as men. So unfortunately, some of the things that we are equal in are things that are killing us. But I think primarily, again, the son of that guy is sitting behind a corporate desk right now with that guy's mentality. And so I think, I hope that I gave a little, just some food for thought as to some of the reasons that might be happening. Because there are people in charge that still think that way. And quiet as it's kept, there are women who still think that way. And I'll leave it there.
We have some questions, but I think you wanted to answer that.
just to piggyback on it in reference to what you said
And
about.
Georgette, in your answer, could you also talk a little bit more about what you said when you were leaving your finance company about being the lowest paid?
Right,
I want
so
you to
that's what
talk
I want to
about
kind of, talk about a little bit. So she talked about who was in charge, which is still the same thing for corporate. So you still have that good old boy platform there. And when I was in there, and I said I was the lowest paid African American female, I was alongside of women. So women still got paid less in our department than men. Even if the woman was a trust officer and a vice president, she still wasn't getting paid the same amount as her counterpart male. So that still happens today, but what she is telling you is about millennials. So our son is a millennial, and he works not on Wall Street, but in corporate for an insurance company. And the amount of money that they paid him to start took me decades with just an associate's degree. As a black male. So he has that too. And he will tell you that he works for a man that tells him how to climb that ladder, who is not going to tell his female counterpart. Whether they're of the same ethnicity or not. Now he works in an environment where they have many minorities in his department, and he reports to a minority. His supervisor tells him, I don't want you to stay here in this. I need you to elevate to another job, and if you stay in this department for too long, then you won't make the money. So in working where I was and climbing up in that, and I worked for a female president of this trust company. And however, her CEO was a male. And that's how you kind of stayed stagnant. In that time frame, in 2008, a lot of women left corporate. they just had it, and it was that they were going to do something else. So when the layoffs came, and it's probably an unheard of situation. The layoff came. We were working in a corporate environment, and they said, okay, the layoff is here. We're going to be bought out by another bank. Those who are going to take a layoff are going to get a bonus of tens of thousands of dollars, and we're going to pay you 65 weeks of severance with your medical benefits and your life insurance and everything else. 65 weeks. I would have been insane not to take it. So, with that said, a lot of women left finance at that time. So this is why you still have the 59-year-old that's back in corporate that's at that level. Because men stayed, but the men that were working there that had to stay were the men that were taking care of their families. And they couldn't all afford to take the layoff. But most of the women could. And they did, or they made a decision to do something. So that's why.
So Linda, Kenzie, and somebody else had their hand up. Gwen.
Yeah, I was talking, she was talking about the Ledbetter bill. Well, I was in the Army, and I think if they approached it like you were saying, everybody, like the teacher, if you're on a certain level, and theirs says you had a certain rank, everybody has that, if you were that rank, that's what you made. And maybe that with a job skill, that, you know, if you're at that skill level, this is what you make, period. And you wouldn't have so much of, oh, well, you're a woman, so of course you're gonna make 50 cents more, less than the male counterpart. Maybe they need to approach it like that.
And is anyone here served in the military? Who else, who's here served in the military? You did. So that's the way it is. There's grades of
Rank.
And there's no conversation about it. When you reach the rank, you get.
That's the salary.
Are men more likely to reach the rank quicker than women?
Not
I don't know how,
necessarily, not
I don't know
necessarily,
much
no.
Okay, so that's pretty unfair in that sense.
One of the things I wanted to say as a woman, I think that we have a lot of problems when it comes to talking about money. A man will have no problem going to his superior and saying, you know, I've worked here a year and a half, I think it's time that, you know, I have some type of promotion or raise. Whereas a woman, I think, often feels like happy to have the job, doesn't want to like ruffle feathers, and kind of just feel, okay, well, at least I have a job. And I think this is a problem for women. I think women need to discuss money. And I mean, I happen to be in a field that's, you know, was started by women volunteers, so, you know, it's not a high-paid field. But there are fields in which, you know, men are making, and they're usually the superiors, and the women are usually, like I worked in advertising, I was an account exec, but all the men were account supervisors. All the women were peppy little things that, you know, they made a lot less than the account supervisor. I think that's very common still today, actually. And I think maybe the millennial, maybe they have a better way
I
of
think if
discussing
a woman
money.
asks, she's being aggressive. If a man
Right.
acts, as he's being proactive.
Exactly.
And they need to just change the vocabulary a little bit.
Change the attitude.
And we need to not be so intimidated, too.
Right,
right,
right.
So in that, I don't, you know, it's not a brag or anything. In that job that I was in that executive position, I did make a lot of money. Not as much, I did. So I traveled and I was afforded different things. But you could still, I could still go to the supervisor and know, or the CEO and know that my counterparts raise, I might be getting 5, but they may be getting 8. And that's just how it went. And I think today we still have some of that. And hopefully the millennials that are coming up will make a difference and make a change, especially for women.
I think so, because I think that, I remember looking, you know, when the internet, when you really started having real websites that really were powerful and people were buying so much online, I looked at malls and said, I don't know how this is gonna work out. Because if I can get the same thing online faster and cheaper, I don't know what they're gonna do. And I began to imagine these dressing room, spa kind of places where you could ship your clothing there and try the clothing on, decide what you wanted to wear, and what size fits you, and then go get your nails done. Well, I want to say I think it's Nordstrom that's actually doing something like this. Nordstrom or Lord & Taylor that's actually doing something like that, where you just go, you try on the clothing gets shipped to the place, you try it on, and then you go. The large malls don't make sense anymore, right?
They're doing to Monmouth Mall.
Exactly.
Making the living space above it and all of the retail and restaurants below it, so that the millennials who will be able to afford living there just have to go downstairs to get whatever they need.
Exactly.
So it's just a sign of the times and how things are.
And you young people will be able to decide. And this is, one of the things I wanted to say to your point, I believe, no, to your point about asking for a raise. And this is really for everybody. You have to know your value. You have to know your value. And when you go in and you say, when you run your resume down, and make sure that you can run your resume down. I mean, do the job. Do the job, right? Do it, right? So make yourself invaluable, but always be more invaluable to you than to anybody else. And walk in with a decision. If they are not able to afford me, this is how I plan to exit. This is the money that I plan to save. I go home, like you said, again, work. You go home and you start researching companies. What company looks like you? What company may be willing to allow you to work from home? Or as one of the motivational speakers I know says, work from anywhere. Who's gonna allow you to do that? Who's gonna allow you to do that? But you have to have something for them to want to pay. Because people are willing to pay.
This is a comment, because I've always struggled with this, and I found over the years, my own personal experience, that I found human resource departments, the gatekeepers of so much mess, that it was my understanding, if you want to discuss, maybe an increase in your salary, the path that you're going to go is you're going to, go to human resources and kind of talk to them, and then they'll go back and they have a discussion with your manager and that kind of thing. But I have found from some of my own personal experiences that they are so good at dictating the status quo that I have questions sometimes. Well, what the heck are you here for? Except for me to fill out my job application and whatever, because when I need to ask a question, whether it's about salary or even if it's about maybe some of those comments that you hear that or somebody needs to address, they don't deal with it. Or maybe my expectation of what they should be doing, which we're never in sync, so okay, I accept that. But I struggle with human resources, all right? They're big business, they're very well established, they are very smooth, but I don't find them terribly helpful, all right?
Mostly in corporate America, they have, in human resources, they have a grid, they have a process, and they have limits. And if you come there and you say, I want this and this and this, they say, well, you're level this, and so your high grid is this, and so we can't, until you advance perhaps into another position, so then you'll get your money. But I remember years years ago, I used to be so fearful of asking for a day off. And I would say to my boss, you know, I would like to take Tuesday off, would that be okay? And most of the time, they, you know, whatever reason, it was justified. But then there was a shift in me, and I became, like in my mid-20s, the harder I skied on the mountain, the more defiant I think I became, and I don't think there was a correlation between the two. But I used to go in and say, I'm taking Tuesday off, there's gonna be a problem with that? And they'd say, no, no problem. I said, okay, great, see, I want to. And that whole shift now I was learning to be my own woman. And then it began to affect other areas of my life. And so I just decided, and having been raised by a mother who raised 7 children, she had 7 children by the time she was 25. Wow. She raised us by herself, and me being the oldest girl, I was her assistant. And so, you know, she would teach me, and she would show me, and she would expect from me. So if I went to the park with 6 kids, I had to come back with 6 kids. So I already learned at 5, 6 years old.
The same 6.
So I kind of looked to a group. You know, they would look to me for advice, and if somebody was bothering them, I had to go, you know, either beat them up or, you know, protect them, or tell them don't bother my brother or sister. But working in a group, I try to be fair. I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. So even in my psychology class, they would say, you know, we're going to put you in groups, and I just, you know, the teacher would just take his notes. So they broke down, and then when we came back with our results of whatever he wanted us to discuss, he said, I really wanted to see who would be the leader and who would be the followers. And he said, Lori, it's no surprise to me that you were leading. So it was because of that training. But when I realized that in business, and you don't have to be, you could be polite in your aggressiveness, and you can be, there's another word, effective, and not be a pest or a nuisance. Just have a class about you, and again, you have to know your worth.
Absolutely.
You have to know your worth.
Absolutely.
Because if you can't present your position and why you should have this and that, then nobody's going to believe you if you don't believe it yourself.
It's assertive, it's not aggressive.
It's assertive. Yes, I think assertive is a much better word.
I will tell you guys one story, and this is about knowing your worth. And I found out about my worth not by just working every day. I found out about my worth through an error. And I have the information about the error on my refrigerator. So it's probably somewhere about 18 years old at this point. So when you're managing $6 billion a day, and it's 38 to 40 portfolios, you have to really be on top of your game in order to know what to invest and what to uninvest, and why you have to do that. And I uninvested in a portfolio, $6 million in error. And I didn't know it. And it crossed over a month and a quarter end. And when I found out about it, I was in my office and I didn't know what to do. I was like, well, this is gonna cost me my job, and now I gotta go home, and we were raising 7 kids, and it just was a whole lot. So I said, I talked to my supervisor, and she says, okay, we're gonna get people involved. And they went to the president and the CEO of the company at the time. And she said, why is Georgette investing and uninvesting $6 billion a day by herself? Why isn't anyone doing a quality assurance on what she's doing? And do you realize how long she's done this? So she said, okay, check it out. They checked it out, and it went over a weekend. So I had time to actually spread my entire self on the altar, because I needed a higher power to come in and cover me, because I didn't know what Monday was going to be. But you find out what your worth is when you make an error. It costs $256,000. And I don't mean that they went and found it. I mean that they had to take $256,000 out of their profit and put it in these portfolios to make them whole. The CEO came back and said, well, first, the president came and she stood in my doorway to talk to me. So I knew that God was intervened at this point because I had an office, but she never crossed the threshold. So I said, okay, so I'm being covered at this point. So she talked to me and she said, I just want to make sure that you're on your game and you're present every day. We'll talk about termination. Good. The CEO said, you know what? I made an error when I was at the time at Georgette's level. I made an error like that too. And this SEC came in from the trading floor. They came in and the Federal Reserve came in and I went to the movies. And I never got fired, and I'm not going to fire her either. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make her vice president of this department at this time. You know what? Because she'll never make a mistake like this again. Because that's how much she's worth. And when you get that, then you just soar. Then you just stay to the end. So young people, get out there and know your craft and give them the best that you can give them. And then you won't have to worry about it later on. You'll soar to heights that you never thought you could because you're giving them all that you have.
And be impressed with God being happy with you. And be impressed with yourself. Because if you allow other people to be your judge, then you will have people who know that you're worth more, but choose, because they might see that little bit of insecurity in you, they choose to see something else, and they choose to go for that. That's why you have to know. You have to be confident in yourself. You have to know your own value, and you have to know, I gotta walk away from this. I have to walk away from this, and I am going to set up myself to be able to walk away from this situation because I am too valuable to stay here and them not know. You know, it's almost like you could almost stay being underpaid if you know that they know your value and they're respecting it.
Can I ask you to talk about,
something you said as well, and an approach you had with your boss. I had the same approach when I was employed. And when you go to your boss, you can't go with a question mark. A lot of us go, I think I'm worth, but I'm sorry, when you start doing that,
I am.
you just told them, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But if you go in, as myself, I did the same thing. I said, I told them, I said, well, I forgot what I said, but anyway, my train of thought went off. But anyway, the approach should be, this is what I'm worth, and this is what I want.
And this is why.
They have, well, this is why. Well, you know what I mean. They have more confidence in you because you have confidence in yourself. When you show you have the lack of confidence, you're letting them know, this is my weakness, like you just said. Okay? You don't let anyone know your weakness, because we all have strength. It's just that we all have to find that strength. And when you radiate that strength to others, they see it, and they'll respect you a lot more. And then you go, what do you think? Because that's your weakness. Well, if you think, then you're not sure, who cares?
Georgette, is the gentleman going to see Wall Street?
Sir, you had a
Great commentary from these terrific ladies up here. I mean, I like the combination of learning to lean on the Lord because He's your Maker, and you get your ultimate self-worth from Him. And the Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. And and also when the great Whitney Houston song, "Learning to Love Myself," was the greatest lesson, or was the greatest love of all. But I heard, obviously, the song went on for a long, but when I heard it, and learning to love myself. Okay, so it's a process. Some people, they might have that when they're 7 years old. Okay, they might think when you're 77. But it's a thing of, not being on some crazy ego trip.
Right.
Okay, and admitting errors and being humble and all that. But it's like, God doesn't make junk. So I mean,
Right.
there's got to be something here.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask if you could talk about what men can do to help improve this whole situation and what they are doing. You mentioned your CEO made a point of not only not firing you, but telling you how valuable you are.
Right, and I just think that, and I'll have to pull it in from my son's point of view, because he works with women and men, but he works with women that have multiple years of experience at this job, because he's only been there a year and a half. And some of them have been there 20 years. So he will come in and speak of, Alice showed me how to do this way. And I think because he's a millennial, men need to look at this woman back here in 1960, at this card and say, I need to look at this a little bit differently. I'm looking at it because she's a female. I need to look at it of what she's capable of doing. Not just because she's a female and I don't think that she can handle this. We have, it's coming, we have the first NFL female football player. And she came in this year. So, it's coming. And like you said, it's only been 100 years. So it's but it's coming. I just think that women just need to continue to know their self-worth and present it in that manner. This is what I know. This is what I do. I'm very new to Indeed and going on the websites to apply for a job. You look at everything on the spectrum. You don't even know, people don't even know, they know that you're female, but they don't even know what you really, they're not even talking to you anymore. They're just taking your resume. So I think it becomes very important for men to look at that experience. Look at what's coming to the table. Don't look at whether it's male or female. Look at how it's gonna change your company or your department or your work situation.
Do you ladies have thoughts on that?
I would also say that men must redefine manhood.
Will you say what you just said again?
Men must redefine manhood. And what do I mean by that? I grew up with very strange men. They thought women were very bright. They thought women were very bright. And they thought that women could do anything. They thought that women could do anything that men could do. We didn't, it was very odd to me, it is still very odd to me when men and women go in different rooms to have conversations, because that is not the way that I was raised. We all sat at the table and we all talked, and women didn't, if women left the table, it was, maybe to go to the bathroom or get another piece of cake or, something like that, but it wasn't, okay, like you see in, what was that movie, with Brett Butler, or Scarlett O'Hara, Gone with the Wind,
Right,
where,
the women
the
go
women,
and go smoke.
yeah, and then
Right.
the men go over here to have their cigars,
Right.
and, that philosophy, again, that practice for many still exists. And I think that, I know that men are capable because my father and my uncles and My grandfather on the other side and my uncles on the other side were all very strong, capable, head of the household, knew how things were gonna run, had the strategy, but they thought that they married very smart women and they wanted to raise very smart women. And so that's what they did. So a lot of this for me is strange. So I think that in general, men are awesome. They need to know it. And it doesn't mean that a woman has to be any less for them to be awesome. They are magnificent, wonderfully made, purposeful human beings who have value and add value. And having a larger paycheck than their wives doesn't make them more valuable. It just makes our society in need of change. So men need to value themselves some more.
I think also in the workplace, it bears to mention that clearly the hashtag #MeToo has changed the entire fabric of the workplace across America and probably in the world. But to now finally put men on notice that women are just not going to sit back and take that anymore, and that we have a voice and we're going to voice our opinions. And you know, it's going to be politically correct. I mean, we're all, sometimes we walk on eggshells, but because of this introduction to this new awareness, it really is an awareness that is long, long overdue. Because I remember even in the 70s, I was working in corporate America, and while I didn't personally get involved in any of that because that wasn't the way I was raised or in my DNA, there were a lot of office affairs going on. And nobody, mentioned it, or they whispered at the coffee, pot. But nowadays, it really men, I think, must take notice to the way they behave, and find if they are not behaving in an acceptable way, find that change, adopt that change, embrace that change. And only then can you change your behavior and change the behavior in others. But I believe that that bears mentioning about the #MeToo, #MeToo movement.
Thank you for bringing that up. I have one more question for you ladies. What do you think are the most effective and best ways and programs to encourage leadership in girls and women?
Programs. It starts at the home. It can continue in the church. If these young women are being reared by strong women, they're going to use that as an example. Certainly we at the church, our young ladies are coming back as from college as entrepreneurs and business owners and positions of power, and it's great to see that. And we're encouraging the boys too to do that as well, the young men. And they encourage one another, which is, I think, truly a blessing. But I think it has to start in the home. And if you can't get it at the home, then the schools and the church, I mean, we all have to be a part of it. It will take a village. But it's just not one facet. But if they are taught that hard work will eventually pay off. Sometimes you work 20 or 30 years, it seems, and then you get that break. While others work 2 or 3 years and they get that break immediately. I can't explain that, but you just have to keep moving in the direction you believe you ought to be moving in. And just stay focused, stay the course, and just be vigilant and diligent and with a purpose. And have a goal. You have to have a goal.
Also, I think women have to support one another. One thing I found when I worked in the city, I was an account executive, and the secretaries were all women. There were only 2 women that were account executives. And I had a lot to do. And usually I wouldn't take lunch. And if I did, I would go to the market or something to get something, because I didn't get home till 8 o'clock at night for dinner. So a group of the secretaries actually went to my boss, a male, and they liked me, but they complained about me because I never had lunch with them. Now, none of the other account executives had lunch with the secretaries, you know, because we didn't have the normal lunch. It was just usually we worked through lunch but, you know, I was a new woman and I never forgot that. Like, I think women oftentimes compete with one another instead of supporting one another. So you're not only getting it from men, but you're getting it from, like as a mother, you know, oh, you work and you stay at home, and there's this competition between women. I don't see that with men. I have 3 sons, and they compete. But
They're more supportive.
they are. They want their guys to move forward, whereas women sometimes seem to be the worst enemy
Right,
of
knock each
another
other down.
woman. Right.
Especially with like beauty standards, I feel like,
Yeah.
and things like that, where.
Like, don't
Everybody
make
feels
fun of
like-
another woman,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And
rather-
instead of being there for them, and I don't get that. We need one another. And you're not gonna break these barriers unless you bond together to break them.
I do feel as though families, especially single parents or any, we really need to continue to look at mentoring programs for kids and boys and girls clubs to make sure that they're looking at it. I mean, there's so many that are out there that children can be connected to. Even when you look at Steve Harvey has a phenomenal mentoring program in which, you know, people may think, oh, I can't apply to that because he's a celebrity. He takes the application. You never know what child is going, and he takes them to Florida and he runs through this program, and he has many, many people that are educated and tell you how to become. And he's had like, I want to say like the group that Oprah got together and her kids graduated, like she had the first graduation class and they're all going to college, they're all out of college now. Steve Harvey has one of those, but there's many different ones on local levels that people should look at to make sure that their children and their grandchildren and their nieces and nephews have something extra than just coming home and playing on that, you know, the thing, whatever. Yeah. The thumb thing. So that there's
That's a college sport now, that's a college sport now.
I realize that,
Okay.
but you know, even sports, even extracurricular activities. Our son played baseball and football all the way up, and he's just going in the career mode of, you know, he's never been in trouble, he's, you know, that kind of thing, and he's never done the drug thing. You kind of keep kids and young people with activities that are not going to have them divert to the opposite of where you want them to go, regardless of even if you're a single parent. So we do need to keep connected with, females need to keep connected. Hey, how's your kids doing? Hey, maybe they might want to do this. And that comes from being a youth director in my church for 15 years. So, you know, my kids had to participate in everything. As long as I'm the director, oh, you're going to be the president. Oh, yeah, it's time for you to be the president. Oh, yeah, it's time for you to be the president as well. So when you have things where you connect with young people, doesn't necessarily have to be your own child, then kids are going to go in an upward motion. And you kind of want to keep it going.
I miss the concept of neighborhoods,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
where next door, you can go, if your mother is working till 5:30, you can go next door and Mrs. So-and-so will have dinner.
Absolutely.
And they used to raise each other's children, and it was, everybody knew the
Yeah.
neighbors, the children's names, and
Yeah.
they
It's
just don't
gone
seem
now.
to have it anymore. The family dynamics has changed so drastically, that was so far from that. Now, they barely know their neighbor.
One of the saddest things I heard was a parent say, nobody talks to my kids. Nobody says anything to my kids. I'm like, okay. And those children made some very costly errors.
Mhm.
Did you mean nobody talks to them, or
Says
she
hello.
doesn't allow anybody?
She doesn't,
Oh, okay.
she doesn't allow that.
And you
So-
see that behavior continuing a lot, right? where, like Laurie said, that neighbors and people in the church helped raise us. Now you see this very singular, if you have something to say, you say it to me and I'll choose to deal with it. And people say, you know, they'll say if they see something, they don't say anything. They say, no, I don't want to say anything because I don't want this woman in my face fussing with me, that kind of thing. You even see it, you know, I see it in church sometimes, because you know how this person is, and you go, but the child just misses out on so much normal living because they're not interacting and they're not hearing the tenor in different voices. All right. You know, I knew when my mother was upset because she always yelled, so I got that. All right. But when a neighbor kind of raised her voice, that was like hearing my mother. All right. And then my father was a totally different world. So you know, you just kind of knew, and now it's very wonky. It's very, very odd. So those are challenges that we have to figure out how to keep our own.
I'm sorry, I wanted to finish your question, but I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I believe young people need to do is decide what your passion is, either for work and or for volunteerism. Because if you look at most companies have some type of nonprofit foundation, they have something, right? And if that lines up with your passion, then go and volunteer there. Because it does a couple of things. It gives you community service hours. It gives you more to put on your resume. And it puts you in contact with people who you may want to be in contact with later on, not just for a letter of reference, but for a job. So, those kinds of things. It's work. You have to work. You have to be resigned. And I mean, you don't have to work all the time, but you have to be dedicated to the fact that you're worth the time that you take on yourself.
Absolutely.
And so, sometimes, and to your question, to add to it, sometimes that's where you find the mentors. Every program doesn't work for everybody. Boys and Girls Club does have a great mentorship program. Sometimes they have a waiting list, and maybe you can't wait. So when you start to figure out for yourself what you really love, and then start to research who's doing this, where can I volunteer?
And there's one right here, Bon Jovi. He has one right near the train station. You can go to the Soul Kitchen anytime you want to, and he will take you. And he's been there for a long, long time. People don't realize that he's there, but he's there. And if you have kids or grandchildren that you want to take there, I need to get them involved in something. How can they volunteer for you once a week, twice a week, whatever?
You've got lunch break, you've
Lunch
got the
break,
library,
you've got the library.
the Parker Clinic. I
Absolutely.
mean, there's lots
So
of
many
places.
right here.
You have a comment?
Yeah, let me see if I can phrase this without getting killed, but I hear us decrying the lack of neighborliness anymore. And I'm a bona fide boomer. We were free-range kids back then. There were a lot of us, and we played with. And if there was, somebody else's mom wasn't away, you could go to a neighbor's. But the thing is, they were all home. They weren't working. That's why they were there. Today, I mean, certainly ever since the '80s, practically now you can't live without having a. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have, if you have if you have a traditional family of 2 people and kids, both of them are working. I mean, how do we get around that? There's no going back to it. There's no going back to it.
Yeah.
But how can we reestablish at least some form of neighborliness?
I'm going to jump in because when I was growing up, all of the women were working. We did have, we had, I mean, there were 2-parent families, which made a difference, but all of the women, for at least all of my friends' mothers, were all working along with their husbands. We just what we did also have was more extended family that was close by.
Very, very good.
So if you had a retired grandparent, it wasn't so much because my grandmother's works too, but it was just by the time the grandchildren came along, everybody was retired. So the grandchildren, my oldest friend's grandmother was our daycare. And then I had both sets of my grandparents that were living and lived equidistant from my home, so I was able to go there. So even though the women were working, it was, the grandparents were available. And they wanted to take care
So
of their
someone
grandbabies.
was available.
Right.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
wanted to take care of, and I have to say, I think my grandfathers were probably more, even more, my grandmothers were great, but my grandfathers were ridiculous in taking care of me. They because I was the only on one side and the youngest on the other, so it was just, you know, messy.
Gwen and Mackenzie.
Oh, yes, there was something. I was gonna say, the mobile family though, like, in today's, there's another term for, you're not that close to family members anymore, and a lot of people, they don't go out to introduce themselves to their neighbors to get that feeling. And as far as like being in the church, you were saying about the church situation, that's when they need to sit down like the pastors, the Sunday school teachers, and then later on the parents, so let them know that if your child is running through the sanctuary, an adult is going to speak to them. We may tell you later, we did have to speak to little Johnny because he was running, but not to be afraid that, you know, that your child is not, yes, they are gonna be spoken to, and they should be spoken to. Now, I can remember years ago, I was at Kmart, and there were these two little boys, and they were just under the clothes and all this. Well, what the little boys didn't know was, I worked with their mother. And I'd seen pictures of them, and I called them by name.
Ooh, that was effective.
And they were, and they ran to their mother. And then she looked up, she saw me and said, all right, she got him. She said, see, you never know who's waiting on you, you know, but that was just, just ironic on that saying. But as adults, we should feel responsible in that it's our duty to say something. And especially if you're talking about a child under 10, and I'm not talking about a teenager that you're gonna afraid it's gonna pull out a knife or a gun and shoot you for saying something, but these little children, they help, straighten them out so maybe they won't get to that step,
Oh, I was just commenting on like the fact that, like what you were saying about like, grandparents being there. Like my grandparents lived in Florida my whole life. So I never had anybody around to help out, and my parents got divorced when I was young, so I was in after school because both my parents had to work. So I didn't have that like hominess of like that. And like even my neighbors, I was just thinking about it, like they would invite us over for dinner a few nights, but like my mom was so busy, but I don't remember her ever really inviting them over, because the neighbor's mom, like they had two parents, so the mom stayed at home and she was able to help out and stuff like that. So like that.
How do you look
The way they
at
lived in life.
where you are now? How do you look back? How do you relate to your after-school activities and the fact that that was really an extension of your, not home life, but an extension of your day?
I mean, I was able to get like a lot of like work done. I made a lot of friends through there, so I think it was a good thing that I had.
You embraced it, you
because
didn't mind it. You didn't
yeah,
mind
no, I mean, my after school was right across the street from my house, so it was convenient, for my mom and everything, and it was nice. I think it helped build like a little bit of community, but it wasn't because of like my town like being very spread out, not really like Red Bank. We didn't really have that much of like kids playing in the neighborhood as much. It was like, that was kind of like who I was hanging out with, like after school with people that I was like in after school program. And then I was able to do extracurriculars and stuff like that, and that was where I made other friends and, you know, met a lot of mentors and leaders and stuff like that.
I would say that when I grew up in our neighborhood, we had several people home. So that meant that if your parent, my mother actually did not go out to work outside until I was 5, until I went to kindergarten, you know, or first grade. So, and then she worked her until she retired. So we did have people, but back in our day, if you got in trouble, you got in trouble all the way up the road. Every mother that was home, you know, because one's gonna call the other. Oh, she's coming up the street and she did this. Oh, and then, you know, and then by the time you got home, you know, you're half dead. You're half dead, and then your parents are gonna kill you anyway. So, you know, but it was like that. So now, when I go back and I look at the neighborhood that I grew up in, it is totally different. But it's not just totally different for the Hillside Park neighborhood, which I told you, the 8-block radius, and First Avenue separates the 4s. A lot of neighborhoods in Middletown are different. And because of the way Middletown changed, the kids that we grew up with in Middletown that were white or other ethnicities, they had to move as well. So it's not like they're there either. So everybody came in to this sector, or it's different for everybody. So they didn't know anybody. Some people made friends, some people did not. So it's very, very different now.
Plus, a lot of issues. First of all, you're talking a lot about the church, and many families don't go to church today.
Yes.
Number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, it used to be we talked to other mother, no, not me as much as certainly my mother did in the neighborhood in which I grew up. But now it's all kids have their own phones. You don't even talk to the other parents, really. Like the kids make the plans. So it's not like you're saying, you know, to another parent something that might happen because you don't really have access to the parents the same way. It is very different now. And regarding girls, I think sometimes it's hard for girls to have the confidence that I have 3 boys, so I don't really know what it's like to raise girls, but I feel girls, they're always saying, I'm sorry, you know, I don't feel that sometimes naturally we have the same kind of confidence that men do.
And you may be right. My daughter has had great confidence in her academia, but she didn't necessarily have it socially.
Right.
Although you would have thought she would. But when she just told me recently that when she graduated from high school, she said, oh, thank God I'm finished with this and I don't ever want to move back. She went to Washington, D.C., stayed for 8 years. So that was big.
Yeah.
That was huge. I mean, she did come back eventually, but she just told me recently, she said, I was so glad that I was out of Middletown, and I can look for new experiences.
High school's horrible for a lot of kids.
And you know something, it's interesting because we're always, down this age, you know, we're always getting these things for reunions. You know, your 10-year reunion, your 20-year reunion. And I did my 20, all right? And then when I got everything after that, I was like, I made a conscious decision. I go, what am I going there for? That high school had nothing to do with who I was. I mean, you know, the prom and all those special events had no impact and definitely did not take into consideration the few people of color who lived in that town. All right, so I go, yeah, what am I going there for? You know, so I you know, and then there's some kind of network now. You know, I grew up in Summit, and so every time I go out and look at it, you know what they talk about? Somebody posts every day the best deli sandwich, the place that made the best deli sandwich. Every day they talk about the Hill City Deli. All right, and I'm going, wow, okay? And I mean, remember the deli sandwich. One, it was over the top expensive, and they used too much mayonnaise. That's what I remember about it. But it is interesting, and I hear what you're saying about your daughter. It was a place I lived. It's a place where you know, it was okay. I mean, it was a decision my parents, chose to live in the town. Well, that's what you do. But it didn't have, the only impact that it had on my life right now is that it was like, okay. There was not that connective, I was part of something, because I had friends, we had, we were good kids, we got along with people, but it was not.
I think if I had to write about the evolution of the neighborhood, I would call it whatever happened to the cookies and brownies. Because that whole idea about the kitchen is where I believe most of life is lived. But the kids would come in and they would grab a cookie, they'd grab a brownie, they'd grab something, whatever, and the kids that just don't have that anymore. They just don't have it anymore. And how do you bring it back? Well, you have to change the mindset of the working mothers who need to work to put the food, the brownies on the table. And so, it's I think it's gone. I think that's
Are we too nostalgic for that, though? I mean, do we need to get out of our own mindset of hanging on to kind of that's the way it was, versus this is the way it is now?
I honestly think it's going to end up, in some ways, maybe not in the way that it was when I was growing up, but if I'm making my own job and I can work from anywhere, then my kids can be there. And my kids' family, my kids' friends can be there as well. And so to kind of just bring it back to women, in the workforce, the definition and the location of the workforce is changing. And so when I have the opportunity to have my children by my side as I'm on my laptop or monitor, big screen like that, and with the advent of Zoom meetings and all of these ways that we can communicate from home or from Barbados or from Portugal, wherever, and you can take your children with you, then it may not sound the same. It may not be, like for us, we did Street Olympics. So, we had baseball and football and volleyball and bike acrobatics and all of this kind of stuff. It may not look exactly like that, but the sense of having a community again, I think actually can happen, because I think that one of the other things millennials are looking for is a whole life experience. I'm not just going to put all the weight on 12, 15 hours. When the reality is, you can send an email to 100 people. You can do a Zoom meeting with dozens of people. It doesn't have to take what it took before the advent of technology. If we're going to have this thing, then let's use it to allow our families to be able to be families again.
I think that's a great
idea.
And
Yes.
we probably, before we wind up, I just want to tell everybody that we're coming up to our 4th year in August, right, of this program. Please tell your friends. Who's here for the first time tonight? Oh my goodness, wonderful. So we do have a little committee. Linda is the librarian program director, so she's in charge of the whole thing. Joe Lockett is on the committee, Ian Jones, and myself. Also, Walter Grayson and Julie Adams, who couldn't be here tonight. So it takes a little group to put this together. Next program is April 24th. It's always a Wednesday. Even though we advertise it at 6:30, we usually probably get going around 6:45 because we want people to
converse.
It's the traffic, as I'm sure you all know, is not pleasant at this time of day in Red Bank. Anyway, April 24th, in honor of Earth Day, the program will be environmental racism. We have 2 men from the Sierra Club who are going to present. It sounds like a wonderful presentation. My warmest thanks to all of you. I just want to say, Georgette agreed to this about a month ago, and then we thought we had some people, and we didn't, and thank you so much to Pam and Lori just a week ago.
And the three
They
of you were
committed to
just
doing
one,
this.
I mean,
Yeah.
we were really
Have some refreshments and mingle and.
Book you said.
That was fine.
That I was
Everyone
fine.
else.
So great.